My name is Mary. I'm 87 years old. And there was a time not long ago when I truly believed my own children had abandoned me. That's a hard sentence to say out loud. When you're a mother, you don't admit something like that easily. It feels like accusing them. It feels ungrateful. It feels dramatic. But loneliness doesn't ask permission before it settles in. After my husband died, the house changed overnight. It wasn't just quieter. It felt unfinished. We had lived in that house for 42 years. Every corner held some version of us. The dent in the hallway wall from when the boys used to race through it. The kitchen table scarred from homework and arguments and birthday cakes. And then suddenly, it was just me. At first, the children came often. They were attentive, organized, efficient. They brought casseroles. They sorted paperwork. They spoke in calm voices about practical things. I was grateful. But after the funeral, life resumed for them, and mine didn't. They had jobs, grandchildren, deadlines, school schedules, vacations planned months in advance. I had mornings that stretched too wide. The phone stopped ringing every day, then every other day, then sometimes not at all. I would sit in my chair near the window and watch cars pass, telling myself they were busy. Of course they were busy. I had raised them to be busy. That's what hurts most. I taught them to be independent, capable, self-sufficient, and they became exactly that. There is a quiet irony in raising children to leave you well. I began to count the days between visits, not intentionally. It just happened. 9 days, 12, once, almost 3 weeks. They texted. They sent pictures of the grandchildren, smiling faces at soccer games, school plays, birthday parties. I would stare at those photos longer than necessary. I wasn't in any of them. I started telling myself a story that I was no longer necessary, that my usefulness had expired. It's strange how quickly your mind can turn busyness into rejection. When you're 87, pride is thin. You don't want to beg for attention. You don't want to sound needy. So I said nothing. When they did call, I kept my voice light. I told them I was fine. I described small routines as if they were fulfilling. I've been keeping busy, I would say. Busy doing what? Washing the same dishes, folding the same towels, watching the same evening news. The house began to feel larger each month. Grief is heavy, but loneliness is hollow. Hollow echoes. I remember one Sunday afternoon particularly clearly. I had expected at least one of them to stop by. No one had promised to. I had simply hoped. I baked a pie out of habit. It sat on the counter untouched. That was the afternoon I felt it fully. this deep, embarrassing ache. I felt abandoned, not intentionally, not maliciously, just gradually. I replayed my motherhood in my mind like a film. The sleepless nights, the school lunches, the sacrifices, the years of putting myself last without resentment. I never kept score. Mothers don't. But suddenly I was aware of the imbalance. I had given them my time when they needed it. Now I needed theirs. And it wasn't available in the same way. I began withdrawing in small ways. When they suggested visits, I told them not to trouble themselves. When they apologized for being busy, I insisted I understood. I made myself smaller so they wouldn't feel guilty. That was my mistake. Silence can look like strength. It is often just fear. The less I expressed, the less they sensed urgency. They believed I was coping beautifully. Inside, I was shrinking. There were days I considered moving closer to one of them, but pride stopped me. I didn't want to be the aging mother who rearranges her life to stay relevant. I wanted to be chosen, and they weren't choosing me. At least that's what it felt like. One evening, my daughter called and said, "Mom, you're so strong. I don't worry about you like I worry about others." She meant it as a compliment. It landed like a dismissal. Strength had become my prison. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something painful. They weren't abandoning me. They believed I didn't need them, and I had helped create that belief. I had spent a lifetime proving I could handle everything. Now I was handling loneliness too quietly. But at 87, something in you begins to shift. You stop protecting appearances. You stop pretending you're untouched. And that's when I decided to do something different. Not dramatic, not confrontational, but honest. What I did next changed everything. The thing I did wasn't heroic. I didn't give a speech. I didn't accuse them of neglect. I told the truth. That's all. It sounds simple. It wasn't. I invited all 3 of my children to Sunday lunch. I didn't frame it as urgent. I didn't mention loneliness. I just said I missed having them around the table. They came. Busy as they were, they came. I cooked the way I used to when they were young. Roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, the pie I had baked the week before and eaten alone. We sat at the same table, though the chairs were different now. For the first half hour, we talked about their lives, work deadlines, the grandchildren's schedules, travel plans. I listened the way I always had. Then I stopped. My hands were shaking slightly under the table. I remember pressing my palms against my skirt to steady them. And I said very quietly, "I need to tell you something." They looked up, not alarmed, just attentive. "I know you're busy," I said, "and I'm proud of that. I raised you to have full lives." I paused. "But sometimes I feel like I've disappeared from them." The room changed, not dramatically, just subtly. My son opened his mouth as if to apologize immediately. I lifted my hand. "I'm not blaming you," I said. "I just want you to understand that I don't feel strong all the time. I miss you. I miss being part of your ordinary days." There it was. No accusation, no drama, just fact. I expected defensiveness. I expected explanations. Instead, I saw something else. Surprise. Real surprise. My daughter reached across the table first. "Mom," she said softly, "we thought you were doing so well." That sentence held no cruelty. It held misunderstanding. They hadn't abandoned me. They had believed my performance. All those years of saying I'm fine had built a wall. I had trained them not to worry. I had trained them not to look deeper. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. Not about schedules, not about logistics, about fear, about aging, about how strange it feels to outlive the person you shared your life with. I admitted I was lonely. That word had felt forbidden in my mouth. Once it was spoken, it lost some of its power. My children didn't promise miracles. They didn't vow to move mountains, but something shifted. They began asking different questions. Who have you seen this week? What are you looking forward to? Would you like me to come by Tuesday instead of next Sunday? Small changes, but steady ones. And here is the part that matters most. I also changed. I stopped waiting passively. Loneliness had made me retreat. Honesty made me act. I joined a small reading group at the local library. I resisted at first. I felt too old, too tired, but I went. The first meeting was awkward. I almost didn't return. I went back anyway. I started calling one friend every Thursday afternoon instead of waiting for her to call me. I invited my granddaughter to teach me how to use video calls properly instead of pretending I preferred the telephone. I stepped forward instead of shrinking back. My children didn't need me to be silent. They needed clarity, and I needed courage. There's something about aging that tempts you to become fragile in spirit, even if your body still stands. I had allowed my world to narrow to the size of my disappointment. When I widened it, even slightly, I felt air return. My children began visiting more regularly, not out of guilt, but because the conversation had changed. I wasn't the strong one anymore. I was simply their mother, human, aging, honest. We set one small ritual, Sunday evening calls, no matter what, even if only for 10 minutes. It sounds insignificant. It isn't. Predictability builds security, and I stopped measuring love by frequency alone. Love isn't always loud. It's often distracted. My children love me. They were never indifferent. They were overwhelmed. There's a difference. At 87, I learned something that surprised me. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is silence meeting silence. I had been quiet about my needs. They had been quiet about their assumptions. We were living inside different stories. When I spoke, the stories aligned. I don't feel abandoned now. I feel connected in a way that is less dramatic, but more real. My house is still quiet most mornings. My husband is still gone, but the loneliness is no longer sharp. It's softened by participation. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I asked to be included. That small act of honesty saved me years of resentment. If you are my age and you feel forgotten, I won't tell you it's easy, but I will tell you this. Silence protects pride, not connection. Speak gently. Speak clearly. You may discover what I did. You were never abandoned. You were misunderstood. And sometimes that misunderstanding is one honest conversation away from healing. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.